Okay, so now we're ready to dive in to the world of remotes or remote repositories. So what is a remote repository? As the name suggests, it's a Git repository that's not on your local computer, that your local computer is going to talk to over a network or over the internet. Traditionally, these were used at software companies. So if I'm working at a software company, I've got my own personal machine that I'm working on, and then there's some like big computer somewhere, a big server in my company's office somewhere, where that is holding the like best version, the company's version of the software, and I might need to sort of pull that software down to my local machine to make some changes to it, and then I push it back up to the remote repository. So in order to understand what that means, pushing and pulling, the very first thing we need to do is connect to a remote repository. So there's two ways to do this. I'm going to show you both because it's a little bit confusing. And you will only ever do one of these two things for any one repository. And so they are init, which you already did. You kind of already know about inits, and cloning. So the first is init. So I'm in this folder, simple remote, and I'm going to git init. So now it's a Git repository. Let's make a quick file here. So code hello.txt. I'll pull up my code editor, and I will just say hello and save that because I have to make some change. Git status, sure enough, I have to make a change. Git add the file, git commit -m, initial commit. Well, that's not how you spell initial commit. Okay, great. So that's happened. If I get log, I have that one commit. Life is good. So this is as we've seen so far from like last week. This is a Git repository that's only on your computer. So now, if you wanted to connect it to a remote repository, the most natural place to do that is to go to GitHub or one of its competitors like GitLab or Bitbucket or something like that. We'll use GitHub in this class. It's the most popular. So in order to do that, we're going to go over to GitHub. This is what GitHub looks like when you first join up, and you might have nothing over here because you maybe have not made any repositories yet. So I'm going to say new, and then you get to this window for creating a new repository. So you have to give it a name. I usually like to give it the same name as the local repository, and I think they have to have no like spaces or anything like that in them. And there's probably some other requirements as well. So anyways, this here, you can add a description, public versus private. It used to be you had to pay for private. I don't think you have to pay for private repositories anymore. And then these down here, for now, we're going to ignore these. This will eventually be something that we care about, but for now, we're going to ignore these. So we create this repository. And what we're going to see is this site or this page, which is, it's a bit of an overload, information overload, but basically what's going on here is asking you, how should you connect that Git repository, which is a remote repository, to your local repository? So I'm just going to use HTTPS because that's the easy version. SSH is like, it's the older school way to do it. Lots of people like it, but it's a little bit trickier to set up. So we'll use HTTPS. So I'm just going to grab this. And what that means is it's like the beginning of the URL. Great. Cool. So I'm going to copy that, come over here, and then I want to connect these two. I've got the remote and I've got the local, and I want them to be connected. So you manage that with the git remote command. So what I'm going to say is git remote, add, and then I'm going to give it a name. So the most common, there's two very common names. There's upstream and there's origin. For now, I'm going to say origin, and you can name it whatever you want. Probably not remote because that'll be confusing for like get remote, which is the command. Even though it kind of feels like it would make sense to have remote be the name of it. Don't do it. Okay, so what I've got here is get remote, add origin, and then the URL. So what that's doing is it's saying, this is saying like get remote says, hey, I'm about to talk about remotes. Add means I'm adding a new one. Origin is going to be the name of the remote, and then the URL that's located. So I add that, and now if I say just get remote, I can check and see that I've got origin. And if I do get remote -v for verbose, it's going to tell me where I can fetch and where I can push. Okay, great. So life is good. So let's do a quick check here. So I'm going to do git log. I've got one commit on my local branch, okay? And if I do git status, now it's going to say on branch master, nothing to commit, working tree clean. Okay, that's what we've seen before. And now I'm going to refresh this page and nothing's going to be different because all I've done is I've connected them. I haven't actually sent any code or any commits up to this remote. And so in order to do that, I need to push them up. So the picture that you want to keep in mind is the picture on the left here. So I've got this local branch with some number of commits. I've drawn 3. There's only 1 in this example. But what we now need to do is we now need to push our code up to the remote. And so the goal of a push is to take everything that you've got here and to move it up to here as well. Okay, so that's the goal of a push. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say git push, and then sometimes it works, so you just type git push, but often it doesn't. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to push, and you have to tell it where you're pushing to. So which remote are you pushing to? You're pushing to origin. That's the name of the remote. And then which branch are you pushing to? Because you also need to specify the branch. And so I'm going to push to the master branch because I'm on the master branch here in my local. So git push origin master. Depending on your settings, you might have to enter your GitHub password right now. Mine is set up such that I don't have to do that, but this would just be whatever the password is to log into your GitHub account. Okay, so it says that it's pushed the code from the local master branch to the remote master branch. So if I go over here and I refresh this page, I'm now going to see my initial commit with that hello.txt. And I'm not going to see any like readme down here. The thing that gets down here is that like readme file, but we don't have that in this particular remote repository. Okay, so I've successfully pushed code up. Now I want to give you an example of where I pull code down. And so I can kind of like take code that's existing on GitHub or another remote repository and pull it down. And so the example over here would be, let's go, just to keep things a little bit clear, I'm not going to do it with this same simple remotes. I'll just pick another one of my repositories. So let's grab this one. Fine, that doesn't matter. So what I'm going to do is once you have a repository with some code on here, or if you're going to take someone else's code, what you want to do is you want to, I believe they just changed this. I think it's here. It's this code button. And what you basically want is you want that same URL. This is the location of that remote repository. So I'm going to copy that with this button here. I think that copied it to my clipboard. And I'm going to go to a totally different folder. You never want to have Git repositories inside of Git repositories. That would be terrible. So for all kinds of reasons. So I'm going to back out of here. So now I'm in my desktop, and I'm going to do a different command. So to emphasize what I've got right now, I now have this example 2 picture where I have code that's sitting up in a remote repository, and I would love to have some code come down from here down to here. Now, there's actually 2 commands to do this. There's the very, very, very first time you do it command, which is to clone. So that's only on the first time. So that what that does is it's kind of like init and then pull. Is basically what it's doing. The more natural thing to do is when you either fetch or pull. The difference between these is that pull will fetch and then merge, and fetch just pulls the code down and leaves it in sort of like a confusing state. I think for now you should know about clone if it's the first time, or pull. And then distinguishing between fetch or pull is sort of like an advanced thing that you can worry about in the future. Okay, so what that's going to do is that's going to pull our code down so that we've got it. Oops, nope, I don't want all that. I just want this here so that we can kind of bring that code from here down to here as well. Okay, so let's do it. I'm going to git clone, and then I'm going to paste that URL in here. So now I've sort of like pulled these 2 bits of code so that they're connected. So now it's the case in both of these 2 examples that I've got the local repository is in sync with the remote repository. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is just the routine around like pushing and pulling and that kind of thing. And it can be a little confusing once you have multiple people working on a single remote repository. We'll get to that in another video. For now, just imagining that you have just one person working on this remote repository. So I now have it, if I'm back on the simple remotes, I can make another change to my files. I can say something like code, let's add something to my hello.txt here. I can say hello everyone. Great. These are always the best changes. Okay, so get add everything, get commit -m, make a new change. Great, so now I've got that, and if I check my log, I've got those 2 commits. Oh, so this is kind of interesting. Notice that the log is actually telling me where origin/master is. So that's kind of neat. And if I did a git status now, does it also say that? It doesn't say it here. But okay, so I could imagine pushing this new code, this wonderful new word that I've written, all the way up to my origin. Just to double check though, let's just see what this looks like. So if I say cat hello.txt, I'm going to see the words hello everyone. So the current version of this is hello everyone on my local machine. And if I go back to the remote machine, so if I just go back, it's here, and even if I like refresh this page and then I look at this text file, it's going to still have the old version because I haven't pushed the code up yet. So this is something you want to be keeping in sync. Is if we go back to our picture now, the actual picture that we have looks more like that right there. So what I would now need to do is push again so that I can take that second commit and push it up to the remote repository. Okay, so just to remind us, I can say git push origin master, and that's going to push that code up to my remote repository. Great, so that's done. And if I go over here and I refresh, sometimes it doesn't immediately happen. At this time it did immediately happen. So life is good. Okay, so that's pushing. And we talked about cloning and init again. In terms of pulling down new changes, that would be a little tricky to do in this video because usually you would pull new code after someone else has made that change. So if you are over in this world here, and you've got something that looks more like this, on the right example 2, you would see that the remote is actually ahead of the local, and so you want to pull down those new changes.